we have is, could you just share with us a bit of what your experience was like being detained in Iran, and what would you say was the most difficult aspect of your imprisonment?
Hello, everybody. Can you hear me? Thanks for coming, first of all. So as you saw, I was arrested in Iran when I took Gabriella to see my parents on the 17th of March 2016 for Nowruz, for the Persian New Year. And I was arrested when I was coming back at the airport on the 3rd of April. And she was given to my parents because she was 22 months old and we were traveling together. At that day, that night, they told me that we've got a couple of questions. And they told my mom that she's going to come back in the morning. But that morning took 6 years. It was very hard. I mean, the first week, obviously, when I was first arrested, I was then, after 24 hours, transferred to a different city, which I never found out why they moved me to a different city to do the main interrogations. But as a young mother, I could not believe that a regime could separate a young child from her mother. Any regime in the world could separate a young child from her mother for any time, let alone for years. And just because I was still breastfeeding at the time, and I have never been away from her for an hour, I couldn't understand what was happening to me. Like, where is my... I remember I kept asking myself, where's my child? I mean, give my child back to me. You've taken my child away from me. I didn't understand the whole thing. I was ignorant of the situation because my mind was somewhere else. My mind was with my child, and I was in solitary confinement. I've never been exposed to any political kind of activity. I come from a very non-political family, so I was never exposed to any experiences that anyone has been to prison in the past for political reasons. So I struggled because I think that the biggest part of my struggle was because I was a mother and I was not with my child. But then that kind of the story developed in a way that I was then transferred back to Tehran, and after like 64 days, and I could, by then she had already turned 2, and I could see her eventually for a couple of hours. But what made my journey very difficult for me was the separation from my child, more than anything else. Yeah, and I, to be honest, I don't know. I mean, we have seen many kind of brutal things happening, even as we speak now, happening in the world, but I was very naive to think that, I think for about 3 years I was in denial that they have obviously arrested the wrong person, but also they will let me go because of my motherhood. But I was wrong. As we all found out, politics comes first, and the human being almost doesn't mean anything when politics is having the biggest power in the world. So I think I was a victim, but I was naive to think that if you're a mother and you've got a young child, they will not do that to you.
And on that same note, talking about politics, how would you describe your current relations with the British government, and also how has your ordeal affected your perspective on dual nationality?
Well, to begin with, I had no hope by the Iranian government because they have got a terrible track record of human rights, and I wasn't really holding on to my hope for them to do anything to me, even though subconsciously I was thinking about, because I'm a mother, they will not do that to me. But deep down I knew that I had no faith in them. But I remember very vividly, as an Iranian, you're always exposed to stories about people's arrests, and this is way before I even had Gabriella. that I was, one day I was watching the news of some arrests in Iran, and I felt lucky that, thank God, that I have the British nationality, that if something happens randomly, this is like 2009, 2010, they will help me. Well, I was wrong, because it was only when I was stuck in a position that I needed their help, they let me down. We are working together with Richard on how the British government has got, I mean, any government, Iranian government as well, but given what they're doing to their people, maybe like we should be less hopeful on their side. But any government has got the obligation to protect their citizens. This is what is written on our passport. So we are working together with the government to make sure that there are laws being passed that British nationals are being protected outside the UK borders. Throughout my journey, I realized that obviously one of the reasons that they arrested me in particular was because I was a dual national. I was married to a non-Iranian and I had a young child. So the story fit very well in a way that if they want to, I realized that the way the Iranian government works is they have got a puzzle, like a couple of bits missing. So they arrest people, and then they look at this piece and they think, okay, she's dual national, she's a woman, has got a child, has got a non-Iranian husband, so we're going to fit her there. And that's the way it works. I mean, it's not necessarily the way that they arrest you because of what you are, what you have done, or who you are. They will figure out where to fit you in their game of, chess, that you will have more value if you're put there or if you're put there. So, as I was arrested, I realized that I think more and more they started arresting dual nationals because they realize that they can get what they want from them, from the other governments. And I think I was used as a pawn for something, as we all know, for the debt. That one of my biggest disappointments in life forever is they eventually paid the debt, something that they could have done in day one, and that ruined my entire life for 6 years and took away my daughter's childhood away from me for 6 years, something they could have done on day one. And I don't think I could ever get over that. Obviously, I am not going to hold on to it because I need to live a normal life. But every time that I think about it, I think that will bother me more than anything else. That, I was let down. I felt that I was protected. I wasn't. And perhaps, one of the reasons that I'm speaking up is because this should not happen to any family.
So this is a question for Richard. What were some of the challenges you faced in advocating for your wife's release and raising awareness about her case?
Thank you. Hi, everyone. I've been watching that video. It's nice to be retired, I have to say. It was a long battle, as those who follow our story will know. And I, a bit like Nazanin, started naive. Like at the beginning, I didn't believe this was happening. I didn't understand anything. I, for my sins, hadn't particularly followed Iranian politics. Didn't really know anything about that actually a government could take someone randomly and use them in that way. So at the beginning I thought, maybe like people in the room, that all I need to do is go on television and shout out our story and explain that this is unfair and wrong, and the world would take care of it. The world meaning the government, meaning the newspapers, it was outrageous. And so there was a discovery of learning that actually there's a lot of injustice in the world, a lot of people competing for attention. And it takes time to build care and to build a story and to build an explanation. It takes time to get that. You need to reach out and get people to care. And it took quite a long time to understand what was going on. Because at the beginning, the natural instinct, and when we first went and talked to sort of experts, people at Amnesty or the UN even, well, what has she done, would be the question. Well, she wasn't holding, hadn't done anything. So most of our expectation, there's no smoke without fire, there must be something there. And so to understand what the story was and that it was around this, we were caught in the middle of a dispute between the British government and the Iranian government. The Iranian government were using very unsavoury tactics to get back what they thought was theirs. And I guess when we made that public, I kind of thought that would be solved. Like, well, once it's everyone can see it's wrong. But actually, again, that was my naivety. This was a dispute that had been running for 40 years, and there were obviously reasons why it had been running for 40 years, and it didn't magically get solved just because a family then went on the television and talked about it. So I was surprised, two things. One, by how long and hard a struggle it was, and how many ups and downs there were, and how difficult it was. And I remember thinking early on, well, we only need to be as annoying as we need to be to get it done. It was like, in anything like that, when you're campaigning, you don't want to be too abrasive because you never know what trouble you get into. But we had like a staircase where we were just trying to do something, and if that didn't work, well, what can we do that's more difficult? And by the end, when we ended up doing hunger strikes on the street, because we'd run out of softer options, and that's not where we started at all. We started off just writing letters to try and knock on the doors of government ministers or MPs and so on. The other thing I was really surprised by, and actually was really lucky by, just how many people cared and supported and reached out. And we did something, we did a petition, an online petition, which anyone could do on any issue, on a website called change.org, but there were a number of websites. And the reason we did it is because I'd seen a couple of other families where they'd done it. And it became a place where we put this thing saying, my wife's been taken, please help. And people would put messages and they'd sign it and so on, that's it. And then it became a place where I could just update what was happening in Nazanin's story. It became a way of telling a story to a community of people that cared and listened and followed. And then who we could then ask to write to their MPs, members of Parliament, or to send birthday cards to an Iranian embassy once, or to come and do. And when I did that hunger, lots of people came to visit, and they've been following the story. That kind of kindness and care and support, and you go through it through a tough hours, and it's tough. But actually, you don't remember the tough times afterwards. You remember the kindnesses. You remember the people that cared, the people that helped. And with all campaigning, it's not the campaigning that results in it. It's the people that care. It's the people that come and listen, the people that follow on. So that for me was a really important legacy. And that flat's still full of all these presents that people gave us on hunger strike and pictures and so on. And a bit too much when Nazanin came. Like, a bit less, detritus of campaign, a bit more normal family. But that as almost like a photo album of care, really important. Really important.
This next question is for you, Gabriella. So how did you stay strong when you were sad or worried about your mom?
I would stay strong by not giving up and having hope that she would come back one day. I would talk to my dad and speak to my mum over the phone.
So on that same note for Nazanin, could you also tell us a bit on how you kept your hopes up?
So I come from a religious family, from my mom's side, and I'm sure everyone we all believe in something. It doesn't have to be my God, it can be energy, metaphysics, hope, love, it can be anything. We all believe in some sort of power in the world that when we are very desperate, it's going to come and help us. When I was in prison, I decided that I was so desperate that everything looked strange and everything looked unreal and wrong, that I had to hold on to something to get myself out of it and to calm myself down. So I became more religious in my own way, and that helped me. Just because I have this kind of imagination that there is some sort of superpower who is protecting me, and there is a reason I'm here, and who will help me to come out of it. When I was in the general ward, there was a lady who was in prison for 10 years. She was Baha'i Mahbash. The last year of her imprisonment, I was with her, and then sadly, when I came out, I came home, she's now arrested again, imprisoned, given another 10 years. So one day she told, as she was being released, one day she told me, Nazanin, one day you look back, I'm not sure if you do know about Baha'is in Iran, they're under so much pressure, and they have been exposed to so many arrests and imprisonments forever. So she looked at me and she said, I'm pretty sure one day you look back at this time and you will be so proud of yourself, that how strong you were. And I was very confused, and I was thinking, what is she telling me? I've got a young child who is 3 and she's outside and I can't be with her. How can I look back at this and think that I was very strong? She was right. It only happened when I came home. It wasn't that I was in the middle of it. It was basically my own faith. It was the people who were in prison more than anything else. I probably, at the age of 40, I mean, you all are very too young to experience this, but one day you will realize that making friends is very difficult. So trusting people is super difficult, and your best friends are from the time that you were a teenager or under 20. So at the age of 40, I made very, very good friends in prison, which I'm sure I wouldn't have ever made that if I was living a normal life. They all helped me. I think we all helped each other when I was in prison to go through all that together, and that made us very strong collectively. And also, I had to be a sane, normal mother for my child, and a good, normal person for my husband. So I think I was very lucky that I had people campaigning for me outside. I was very lucky that I didn't necessarily know the extent of the campaign that was going on to get me home when I was in. It was only when I came out on the ankle tag with COVID that I found out what exactly was going on, because I didn't have access to anything. Obviously, we had very, very limited access to the phone. And every time I could see my parents, she was with my parents, and we decided that we don't want to talk about prison in front of them. So every visit we had with Gabriella, it was all about making origami, drawing, singing songs, reading books. It wasn't about, what's Richard doing? And it was only like very, very brief conversations with Richard on the phone that he could, even on the phone, because you know that the phones are tapped and you don't really trust the phone line. It was only when I came out that I found out that, you know, this kind of huge campaign was going on and all these people were helping me, which I'm sure one of the functions of being in prison is to keep you disconnected from the outside world and to make you feel you're forgotten. And there is a reason for that, because that will give you power and hope and strength and resilience, and you'll be able to go through it. Had I known when I was in prison that this kind of huge thing was going on, it would have helped me, I'm pretty sure, a lot more. But yeah, that was the way. I don't think I survived very well, if I'm honest. But that's, you know, it's a very relative thing. I think you have your expectations from yourself. But it wasn't just me, it was the outside, the people in prison, Faith, my family, many, many other people.
This is also for Richard. Would you say that your 21-day hunger strike was effective in communicating your message of protest against your wife's detainment and spreading awareness about your wife's case?
Yeah, I wouldn't recommend anyone does a hunger strike. To clarify. So we did 2 hunger strikes. One was in front of the Iranian embassy, and it was 2 weeks long, and the other did it inside prison, and I did it outside. And that was very effective for annoying the Iranian authorities, and probably for drawing attention more broadly that this was an injustice. I don't think it had quite cracked through. The thing I remember about that, apart from it being, I mean, it was sunny, so lots of people came down, it was quite almost oddly carnival-like. But also, lots of Iranians came down. And until that point, you know, Iranians can be quite cautious about getting involved in politics because of the consequences, they don't have family going on to visit and so on. So people didn't come down to our demonstrations ever, and then lots came down, mainly because So when we did a hunger strike on the Iranian embassy, the Iranian embassy was very cross, tried to get rid of us. The police wouldn't move us on because it was a letdown. So they then started various harassment tactics to try and spray wash their railings and sand them down and put up a screen on us and it blew over on top of us and so on. Which had the negative effect from their perspective of being fascinating for the media. So the news kept coming out and filming them. So by the end we had live stream of our hunger strike out, which was just the worst decision that they... And then they were trying to cover up and so on. But as a result of that, the Iranian embassy barricaded itself in. And then it kind of became safe for all the Iranian opposition, really. And they built this thing which we then decorated with post-it notes and messages and flowers and so on. So, I mean, kind of like was right. And not planned, kind of just organic. But lots of Iranians came down and shared their stories of what happened to their family. And for me, that was a real awakening. It was the first time I'd really been exposed to quite the level of you know, untold stories there are out there of just terrible things happening in the world. And actually, our family story was not the worst story on any given day of what I had. So it was quite humbling and almost like energising, if that makes sense. The second hunger strike, which is the one that you actually asked about, which was a couple of years later, and the problem with doing something the second time is it's a bit dull for the media. The media likes things for news, so candidly, they say, oh, he's the bloke that does hunger strikes. And so I had to do it for longer. It was winter, which is a lot colder camping on the street. I mean, the thing with the hunger strike is it's not the hunger. Like you're hungry the first day, and you're oddly irritable the second day because you're just your body. And then after that, your body adjusts to the fact that it's not getting you food, and it rewires from the spare bits you've got stored up, which after COVID I had a few. I was better in the way. So then there's a few days where it's kind of okay, and you just get a bit slower. But what's happening to your body is slowing down, so you get colder much quicker. So in the winter it's much tougher. And I remember by the end my feet, not only were they just hurt the whole time. And that, you know, I remember it was a lot creakier as a physical experience. And I was saying to someone earlier, it felt in some ways a bit like staying up all night. Like you just got slower in everything, a lot crankier in your emotions. And I remember like going to meet with. So the benefit of it, of course, is the point is to be visibly shaming. So I'm shaming the British government by being there, suffering in a really conspicuous way to try and get them to do something. And we got invited in for a meeting with the Foreign Secretary after a couple of days, and then after 20 days, day 18 maybe, we got invited again. And by that stage, I was stinking because I hadn't washed everything. So it just looked like a tramp. I had no emotional discipline at all. So, you know, I got told that so I was pacing up and around, like really a crazy guy to be in these meetings. All hunger strikes normally end in failure. So when we ended it, we had these 4 things we wanted to achieve, and achieved any of them. But what it did was so mobilised a level of support and outrage by that point. And we did a meeting, we had a debate in Parliament where there was like 50 MPs insisted on speaking. And I think it did just crystallise for the government, the Minister at the time, that she wasn't going to have us come back and do that again. So it ended in failure, and I remember being really dispirited afterwards. Like, well, what else is there to try? I mean, 2 months later, she was home. And you never know what you don't know, you don't know what's going on, but I'm sure the political cost of leaving us on their doorstep had got too big, so that changed things.
Another question for you, Gabriella. How did it feel when your mom came back, and how did that really change your life?
I mean, I was quite happy. And I was happy to see her again. It was a nice time in my life. Yeah, so she would make me nice food. And she would do my hair. We weren't late at school.
All right.
In what ways did you find it challenging to readjust to your life in the UK?
So I came back home when COVID had changed the world in a very different way. So I heard so many stories from people saying that, oh, we felt a little glimpse of what you went through when we were stuck at home and we couldn't go out and we couldn't see people, which is very nice, but I don't want anyone to experience solitary confinement, because through COVID, it was a very strange experience collectively that everyone went through, but solitary is a very different experience. However, it had changed the world in a way that I came back to what was very different to what I had left 6 years before. It was very, very humbling. It was absolutely humbling to get out of the house. We have about 10 minutes walk to get to the main tube station where we live. It would take me about 2 hours to get out of the house and get to the train station, just because everyone would just stop and explain how happy they are that I've come back. Hand me flowers. People would stop their car in the middle of the road, come out and give me a hug. It was very emotional, it was very humbling. It made me feel I was loved by so many people who had no idea who I was. And of course, people shouting my name in the tube, Nazanin, and you're back. And I was like, I can't even believe that my story had touched so many people's hearts. It was extremely humbling. But something that I want to say is, when I came out because with COVID, with the fear of COVID going through prison, they let some of us out. And they eventually gave those people who were out, they gave them clemency, so they didn't go back to prison. I was the one and only one who was not given clemency, even though I was eligible, but I was given an ankle tag, so I was at my parents' house. When I came out, Richard told me that there was a chain of women doing hunger strike, and I think Pragna was here recently.
Yes.
So she was the one who was mobilizing the chain of hunger strike. So there was basically one woman every day going on a strike, and they had got a website, and you could go and subscribe when you would want to be joining this chain. And I randomly went on the website, and I thought that I'm going to join myself on the chain of hunger strike that is going to take me home. The first day which was available was the 11th of June 2024, which is her birthday. She will be 10. It made me cry, thinking how many people have already, it was about 2 days that they put out this kind of campaign that already 700 people have, or even more, I can't remember exactly, have signed up to join this chain. But also, I took it as a good sign that the only day that they gave me, the first day that they gave me was her birthday. And then obviously I got horrified that she's going to be 10 if I'm not going to be home. She's going to be 10 by the time. It took me a very long time to adjust. I don't think I have still adjusted. I do not go out often. I'm not very sociable. Or used to. I have got anxiety of going to very busy places. I've got anxiety of being in a tube, or I'm a bit claustrophobic. Obviously, mental health is a big issue. I've got sleeping problems. The lady was talking to me about the sleeping problems. I have got severe sleeping problems. I've got nightmares, and I constantly think about the people that I have left behind in Iran. Luckily, over time, people come out of prison, but prisons are for a reason. They will never be empty. There will be always somebody in prison. So it has been a very, very slow progress. But I cannot complain. I'm free. I'm back. So it's great.
And Richard, How would you say that you were able to balance advocating for your wife's release and also taking care of yourself and Gabriella?
Thank you. Badly, I think is probably the honest answer. In simple terms, I've had 2 phases of campaigning, 3 now, as I said. There was a phase where Gabriella was in Iran, and I was sort of learning to campaign and ended up becoming almost like a full-time campaigner with a little bit of work on the side. And then when Gabriella came back, and she would have been 5 and a half, came out of school, I had to learn to be a dad again. You know, lots of sort of things you forget how to do, or you forget to sort of remember to bring a bottle of water, or all the presents, or change of clothes and so on. And had to learn the right to parent again, that makes sense, learn to build trust and so on. So by that stage, I'd just become a guy on a mobile phone, who might send presents or whatever else, but was very distant. So building, learning to be a normal parent, and always learning the balance of normal life, if that makes sense. Which took time and was imperfect, and as I was saying, I had COVID in the middle of it, so that then disrupted everything. And you heard the critique of my cooking as to how well that went. It took time. I think probably we did certain things, and the hunger strike's a good example. That's a sort of a very full-on campaigning action that can be questioned as being irresponsible for a child. And so Gabriella was brought down, and lots of the family mobilised. So my sister came and stayed, and then her husband stayed for a bit. Then his brother was there for a while and helped in lots of ways. But still, it was a hard strain for the whole family. And I remember rationalising that I think the best thing for us to become a normal family is to get Nazanin home. And so that gets the lion's share. And Gabriella did join in certain campaign activities. And that was my decision. It wasn't always one that her mum agreed with. It wasn't always one, I remember the hunger strike, people did come in because like, why are you exposing your child to this? And also, with respect, she's lost one parent alive, don't you play fool's errand here and so all those things where, none of us ever know, well, all of us learn our parenting mistakes through making them. We battled through. I think it's a different journey to be normal now, and learning normality again. I was talking before. You almost don't realise how highly strong you are when you're in battle mode and campaigning until it stops, and then you start to notice your parts of life. And being a normal parent, both from doing fun stuff and relaxing and not being always focused on one topic, also making people do homework and so on, all that kind of the balance of life, right? It was out of kilter and it's getting more balanced. But I don't think, it felt throughout it like I was juggling badly, and I would know, oh, that's a ball, to pick that ball up again. And I learned to be quite forgiving of myself through it, and just actually, this is a crazy period, but we'll just get through it. But certainly, from talking to adults my age who had been children of political prisoners in South America in the 70s and the 80s, there are scars that come out when you're a teenager and so on, and it's like, why did you make the choice to marry and not? So we'll see where we go on this.
Thank you. That's the end of our questions and now.
Okay. Right, so basically, as I said, about 10 minutes for this. So I'm going to go on this side of the microphone, and my friend with the Glasgow Celtic jersey on, you don't look right, you're going to come and take this microphone. A big round of applause for him. So there you know, anyone who turns up with a Rangers jersey will have a problem, okay? You can do both sides. Right, so, who would like to get us started? Don't all jump at once. Right, okay, we've got one here. It's okay.
If you could, at all, over these last few years, if you could go back in time and just tell, I guess, each of you any words of advice to your previous selves, what would you say?
very tough question. So I was very unsettled when I was in solitary confinement. And for the best part of my incarceration, I was very unsettled. I couldn't get over the fact that I was not with my child. And that was the biggest pain that I was carrying with me. There were times that I couldn't see freedom at all. And I felt I'm never going to be free. And there were times that I could have spent my time in a different way, but I spent it worrying about freedom not happening. And also, like, it's very hard to lose hope when you're in prison. It's very hard to your mind to be occupied by just worry and anxiety, whereas I could have spent that on, for example, learning French, which I started in prison, but I kept going back because I just couldn't focus, because I was just so constantly worried about what's going to happen to me in the future. There is one thing that I've learned eventually, and that was whether we worry about something or we won't, it's not going to affect what is going to happen to us at all. It has no value, whether you worry about what's going to happen to you tomorrow. I wish I had that insight, that I just stop worrying. There is a reason that I'm here, and things will work out eventually. And I would have probably made a better use of my time. Okay.
Yeah, it's a really good question. There's kind of lots of things you could say, and I think probably for me, when you go through sort of a campaign, it's really hard to get really quite defensive and almost like a tortoise, like, or a hedgehog, like closing yourself and battling, and just learning to trust people, and people will surprise you, and the kindness of strangers is a real thing. You live it one day at a time. You have good days, you have bad days. Part of the job outside is to keep hold of the light, to keep an idea of, like, campaigning almost is like just holding up a lantern. And that's what do sailors' wives do in storms. You don't know what's going to solve it. There isn't some sort of magic silver bullet off the time, where we know anything well. But there is something that it is, as Nazanin was saying, it's really hard to keep hopeful inside prison. It's really hard to keep hopeful staring injustice, and we all encounter that in different ways. But do be surprised by how amazing people can be. And that, was even true, I have to say, from some politicians and ministers, like people I wouldn't have expected. Some of them were just, you're a good guy. I thought you were, we met lots of people. We were exposed to cruelty, we were exposed to stupidity, we were exposed to all sorts, but we were also exposed to an awful lot of kindness and care. And that's the bit I treasure now. And that's the bit to always remember, it is there, even if you're hurting inside.
Another question? Oh, yeah, okay.
So, how was your family's story thought of in Iran? Was it thought about at all? Was it something that was known? And conversely, do you have any issues with how the international media treated your family's story, how they covered it?
My story in Iran was not as big as it was in the UK, purely because media in Iran is state-run, and they choose what to be included in the media, except pretty much everyone listens to satellites and watches satellite TV. So they would have access to what is being broadcast in the UK through satellite. but also it was very interesting that people in Iran almost didn't want to have any connections to me, just because that's how the way things work in Iran and how the regime functions, that they will work on the basis of terror. If you are a political prisoner, we don't want to have any connections with you because we are having our own business, we are living, we want to have our job, we want to have our security. So it was a very different interaction with my family as well. Neighbors knew, my parents' neighbors knew that I was their daughter, but they wouldn't necessarily come forward and console my parents the way that people were doing, like our neighbors were doing in the UK. But in prison it was a very different experience. I love my country. If there is a chance, hopefully in the future, I will go back to my country. That is, I think that's how everyone feels about, their homeland. But the way I was treated inside prison was very different, and that is, I think, because of the way I was portrayed internationally. And I think one of the things that my parents decided to do, they decided to be quiet in Iran because we had someone outside Iran who could campaign for us. And I don't know how things would have been if we didn't have Rachid to campaign for me. Not everyone had that opportunity, and that is why I think there is a value that if I am here, I talk about the people I have left behind in Iran, because not everyone has got the opportunity to speak up and to tell their story. But I was very lucky because my parents and my siblings didn't need to put themselves in trouble, in danger, to talk about this.
I think on the international media, it's a really good question, and over the years so Nazanin only came home because of media attention and care, and the sunlight that lots of people care and brought. And different media covered her story in different ways, and broadly, you spend your time trying to work out how can I get on the television then, how can I get, why can't this issue be on the news? And with a slight chip on your shoulder as to why this isn't being covered, why is that issue being, and I remember once doing a morning show. She was doing a morning show that got cut, so it was there in the studio, but then didn't get put on. And the lead item was around a vegan sausage roll. So there was someone had invented a sausage roll, and I was like, what, that's more important than someone being held hostage? A bit more entertaining, let's be honest, a bit of a dark story, hostage taking. What I struggled with, and I got better at it, but I got better rather than conquered. The media will have a way of covering the story, and there's a generic quality news. There are essentially three questions. What terrible thing have the Iranians done? How do you feel about it? What do you want the government to do? UK government. And anything that didn't fit into those three questions just got lost. And essentially our story, we were caught in the middle of a government fight that was a suppressed, furtive, kind of half-disclosed dispute. And so what we were seeing was the Iranians would do something kind of provocative and annoying and crazy to goad a response. And the media were just reacting to it. And we'd end up with this thing like, hostage taking, kidnapping has got a similar logic. Like, there's a kind of a dangling dynamic where you're showing off, we've got someone, we want something. The media were part of that. And I had to, use the words like hostage, I had to do the brave stuff, I had to do the analytical stuff, working on, and I had to be the one to say, listen, so if you look at that video, it's all Richard claims, Mr. Actor claims that his wife's being held over. It wasn't claiming about it, it was that's why she was picked up. Now that wasn't immediately obvious to us on day one, it may not have been to the government, it was quite quickly. And that kind of navigating how you get things talked about, get into the sunlight, is not simple. And there are frustrations, but you're best off being grateful for everything you get, because every bit helps, and it's just chipping away at this big rock face. Gradually it moves forwards, and I think all of the families that and we all would get a bit jealous of each other. As it's not zero sum, but we would all get jealous of why they're getting attention, not us. But it gradually will move forwards, And you have to learn not to have a chip on your shoulder, because there are so many injustices that never get noticed. You know, the world is full of things. So it's a blessing when people care. You sort of need to learn to focus on those that do care, not those that don't. And gradually, that's how you build any campaign.
Let's take one more question. Yep. Was there a question over there?
Yeah, there was.
Okay, so we'll just take quickly two, because this is a once in a lifetime opportunity. And if you're late for class, you can blame Mr. Deegan, okay? So, on you go. Yep.
So you've talked about the effects after your imprisonment, but what sort of conditions did you face inside of prison, and what was your day-to-day life?
Very interesting. I can only talk about it like this because I'm out. Things in prison are very monotonous and regimented, so you would have the day to go through, and your biggest problem is time. You have so much time, very little thing to do. We had an amazing library, which was somehow secret, so the prison authorities didn't know we had those books. And the reason for that was we had hidden the majority of the books in our beds, and we didn't let them know that we have this. So every time they came to inspect the library, we would give them a different list. So books saved my life in a way. We would do lots of book reading together and individually, and like 2 by 2. We had a workshop. We would work with wood, leather. We had lots of kind of knitting sessions. I did sewing in prison. We played volleyball. I did Zumba, yoga. I used to teach yoga in prison. By the end, when I was coming out, I was long enough in prison to teach pretty much anything that I had been learning all the time, which was fun. And then we spent, as women, we had a small kitchen so we could cook our own food, which was nice. But we spent the best part of our day to think about what we want to eat, to prepare for it, to cook. We had a couple of TVs so we could watch movies. I'm not going to go through details because we did some naughty things, but because people are still using those services in prison, I'm not allowed to tell you. But we watched pretty much everything. We watched Breaking Bad. We watched House of Cards. Yeah, it was an experience. The other thing we did was we had English classes. So people who could speak English would teach everybody else, and sometimes French. So I was a student of French. It was fascinating. The life in prison, if you put away the injustice of why you're in prison and the fact that you will miss the people who are outside fighting for you, it is quite interesting. Yeah, so this is when you come out of solitary. Solitary is horrific. Yeah, solitary is a different experience. There is nothing, you're locked up in a room, in a cell, with no window, and they only open the door to give you food or medicine, or you're let out 2 15 minutes, 1 in the morning, 1 in the afternoon, if you're lucky, and if the guard is in a good mood, and if not, you won't, to let out to have a 15-minute walk. The light is always on. There is no sense of time. There is no sense of you lose sense of time because you don't know what time of the day, which day of the week, what time of the year. Everything gets just muddled up. Once you come out of that, and in the general ward, then you meet interesting people. My experience, it was interesting. But then it's not all that, because in prison you have fights, you have jealousies, you have people going to trial, people being angry, people being relocated, sent to other prisons. So there is not always tranquility and quietness. There is also kind of fear, horror, chaos.
Well, we'll take one last question down the bottom there and we'll wrap it up.
Sort of on the topic of solitary, what were the psychological impacts of being in solitary confinement like?
You're too young probably to know the psychological impact of solitary confinement. I am claustrophobic, so being in a closed space was a very scary experience. But also, the function of solitary confinement is to wreck you, to take what they want from you. So they will keep you in a place that you don't know what is going on in the outside world, you have no sense of time. They often tell you that you're forgotten, no one cares about you, no one knows where you are. And it is, in my opinion, it's a kind of silent form of violence. So you're dehumanized, you are humiliated, you are scared, and the whole point for that is to wreck you, to open up and to speak up, often to something you haven't committed. Just because the condition is so awful that you just want to get out of it with any price. Some people break, some people don't. For me, the main consequence was I had nightmares. Even now that I have been released nearly 2 years, I still have nightmare of being back in solitary. The light being on all the time was very disturbing. So one of the problems that I have with sleeping is because there has to be absolute no light. Otherwise I can't sleep. And I think it's psychological more than anything else. It's more the fear and anxiety being internalized, and it's the fear of being left out, being forgotten.
Okay, well, thank you very much for being such a captive audience. Just 1 minute before you go back down the road. I'd like you to give a huge round of applause to your cohort, first of all. Aimee, Patricia and Harper. And also please to Gabriella, Richard and Nazanin for coming with.